friendly language learners. As you know, I'm at a pretty advanced level of Spanish, beginner level of French, and I just recently added Yiddish to that mix. Now, when I say that I am learning 3 different languages, that sounds really cool and really intense and really like a lot. So in this video, I want to talk about how I'm learning these different languages and not just, day-to-day routines, because I don't touch every one of those languages every day, but I want to go more in the direction of how my strategy is different between languages based on a few different factors. And hopefully you knowing that, you can use that kind of information to apply it to your own language strategy so that it makes sense to you, because the differences in the languages and a bunch of different factors really dictate how I'm approaching each language differently. I'm going to start with my most confident language to my least confident language. So I'll start with Spanish, then I'll go to French, then I'll go to freaking Yiddish. I'm learning Yiddish. What is that? First, Spanish. So if you don't know my story, I've been learning Spanish off and on for like 10 years, started off in high school, didn't really learn a whole lot until I moved to Spain and, immersed myself in the country for a year. I'm very confident in Spanish. I can communicate in most situations. Now, eventually my goal in Spanish is to take and pass the C2 exam. I'm nowhere near that. I'm like B1, B2 on a good day. I'm not putting a whole lot of effort into it right now, but it's definitely a long-term plan for me. And the biggest reason why I'm not putting a whole lot of effort into it right now is I quite frankly don't have the time. I'm at an intermediate or advanced level of Spanish, which means like if I were affected by the concept of intermediate plateau, and if you want more information about the intermediate plateau, I have a video all about a different way to see it. But basically, I don't feel really stuck by it because I have shifted my perspective to a more advanced learner, which means that in order to improve in the ways that I need to be improving with Spanish, it would require a lot more time. Right now, I just don't have that time, and that's okay. I will at some point, just not right now. So how does that translate to my strategy for learning Spanish? I'm not actively trying to improve per se. I'm at more of a maintaining kind of stage in my Spanish. So what that means is I try to touch Spanish reasonably often. I'm basically open to any opportunities that I can find to use my Spanish, and I will, make an effort to join them if I see it possible in my schedule and in my level of energy, what's going on in my life, but I'm not going to make it a huge priority. Now, the reason that I have this approach is that I am at a level in my Spanish where if I leave it for a week, it'll be fine. It's not really going to do anything because I have so much information in my long-term memory. I have so many hours behind my Spanish that leaving it for a little while isn't really going to do a whole lot. And the things that I am doing for my Spanish include more advanced concepts like conversations for an hour and reading a book and doing something that, I'm past, using Duolingo or Drops or Memrise to push my vocabulary forward, for example, because it's more important to me to make sure that I'm taking new vocabulary in context that makes sense, kind of immersing myself in the language. That also means that the language resources that I'm using right now, they aren't those simple apps that, keep poking at my brain every day for like 10 minutes. The resources that I'm using are books, are movies, are conversations, something a lot more advanced that has me kind of living in the language for a fairly significant amount of time. Does that mean that I am like above apps with my Spanish? I'm too advanced for apps to be worth it? Absolutely not. For example, when I have the time and the energy, I am totally eyeing Closemaster to work on some of the advanced beginner stuff that I wish I had a more confident Borambara. Oof, man, how do I get so far? How do you get so far in a language and still struggle with that advanced beginner stuff? It's a thing. But regardless, I am definitely more in a strategy where I am just kind of open to the opportunity to use a language in a way that makes sense for my level, like conversations, like book clubs, things like that. How is that different from my approach to French? So if you don't know, I started learning French a little under a year ago. It's getting to a year soon. So I'm still a beginner. French is decently easy because I am so confident with Spanish, and Spanish and French are very, highly related. They're both Romance languages. They have a lot of the same grammatical structures and vocabulary. So it's fairly easy for me to pick up French. It's like, a hop, skip, and a jump from Spanish a lot of the time. But at the same time, it's really different in some ways, like listening, the accent, the sounds, the melody of the language are very, very different from Spanish. So that requires a lot of effort to get there. I have to consciously, purposefully practice my listening in French in order to understand French. Like I said, my goal with Spanish is to eventually take the C2 exam. With French, I'm not entirely sure. I might get there one day. I'm not really sure what my goals are in French right now. I just know that I want to learn more. I might get to an upper intermediate level of French and be done, and that might be totally fine with me. Not as goal-oriented as I am with Spanish, but still fairly goal-oriented. While my difference in goals between Spanish and French don't really affect my language strategy because I'm still a beginner in French, and that requires just like that really requires a lot of taking in of different ideas and concepts and just taking everything in. My approach to French is different because, like I said, I'm a beginner, so I can't have an hour-long conversation in French. I'm just not able to. French requires more consistent work for shorter periods of time. With French, I don't have the stamina to have a conversation for an hour or listen to a conversation for an hour or talk about more complex things like something that happened in the past or something that might happen in the future. I don't have the vocabulary for that yet. I don't have the grammar for that yet. I don't have the listening skills for that yet because I still have to get my skills up to par with French. My strategy is a little bit different. I'm doing a lot more intensive, specific, intentional grammar work just because I need to learn the grammar. The grammar is similar to Spanish, but it ain't exact, so I really gotta learn it. I really have to make a conscious effort to learn it. So what does that mean for resources? Well, because I'm at a beginner level, I've got a lot more resources available to me. Something like Drops or Duolingo is beneficial to me because I really need that beginner support. Currently, my main focus is using Quizzic for French because it really builds up the nitty-gritties of the grammar and the listening practice and the reading practice, and it's much more intense, which I like. But I need that support. I need that strong support for learning the individual concepts, details, grammar points, plus some of the parts of Quizzic, like the listening exercises where it's like a 5-minute listening exercise and you dictate for a more intensive approach to listening. That is really beneficial for me right now. Not really beneficial for me in Spanish because I can pretty much understand the gist of everything that's happening in Spanish depending on the accent. But with French, I don't understand that then. I don't understand anything because my listening comprehension is not there yet. So I definitely need to make more of an effort to understand, and I really gotta build up those skills. Because of how my level of French is very, very different from my level of Spanish, it requires a significantly different approach, strategy, resource, frame of mind, perspective. Frame of mind and perspective are the same thing, whatever. But all sorts of things. You don't approach a beginner language like you do an advanced language. They're different. They're different languages, you have different skill levels, you have different goals for them, etc., etc., etc. And that is really poignant in my approach to Yiddish. So I have done one video about Yiddish, approaching Yiddish with Mango Languages, link below in the description. And when I made that video, Yiddish was an interest, but I really had no intention of using it, mostly because I found that Mango Languages isn't appropriate for me at the very beginning, and that's fine. But then Duolingo added Yiddish, and Duolingo ain't perfect, it's not for everything, but it is very accessible. And when I found out that I could start with some Yiddish on Duolingo, I tried not to do it, but all of a sudden I'm learning Yiddish. And if you don't know why, it's because I learned that my ancestors, when they came to the United States, like 150 years ago, a few generations back, they spoke Yiddish. That was their native language. So I want to connect to that, history of my family. So obviously the reasoning behind it is different. I have a much more emotional connection to Yiddish than I do to Spanish or French, which that is one thing that shifts my language strategy. Another thing that shifts my language strategy is that it is not a Romance language. Yiddish is a Germanic language. So while it's similar to English, a lot more similar than you'd think, by the way. If you don't know any Yiddish, you'd be amazed at how similar Yiddish is to English. There's a completely different alphabet. So I have to learn an alphabet. I mean, you don't have to, but I really want to. So that alphabet is a whole other chunk of language that I want to learn, which that's just like a whole other skill, which drastically changes my approach. I've never had to learn a new alphabet before, which is really interesting, and I'm really excited to do it, but that shifts the strategy a lot. I can't just jump right into I am a woman, this is a dog, those kinds of base sentences. I have to really focus on the alphabet and reading the alphabet and learning to understand the alphabet as if it were English and not just, you know, kind of guess and all that kind of stuff. I want to actually be able to look at the Yiddish alphabet and just like understand it and read it. Another big difference with Yiddish for me is that I don't actually really have any interest in having a conversation in Yiddish, and that may change in the future, and that's totally fine. I do know that I want to connect to like my ancestors with Yiddish and, you know, learn about the history of Judaism because they were, you know, Yiddish Jews, and I want to learn more about that. So I don't really have as much of a strong end goal with Yiddish. I am doing a thing that is new to me, and that is called dabbling. A lot of people like to dabble in different languages. I have never done that, so this is interesting. Like the concept of learning it when I want to learn it and in the way that I want to learn it without an end goal in mind, without being focused on the long term, without, you know, looking at a 5-10 year goal, whatever it is for a language, without having that there, and instead just kind of learning what I want to and learning when I want to. That is an interesting concept which I am exploring with Yiddish. That is fun. But again, that definitely shifts my strategy, how I'm approaching Yiddish and my perspective on Yiddish. And it's also really hard learning a new alphabet. It's very interesting because beginner languages have been easy for me, and now it's not, and that's really fun. That I have to work so hard to, you know, when I want to translate like I am a woman, where that takes a second, that takes a minute. I can't just like come up with it like that. I have to like think about it. I have to see the alphabet. I have to see the letters come together in the alphabet and pay attention to which letters are in the words. And it's a fun experiment. It's really exciting. And as a language coach, also, these different exposures to language and these different experiences help me with my clients, so I can help understand where they are and help direct them and where they are. That's a really big thing too, because even though I'm very experienced with how to learn languages, I'm not very experienced in different languages. And obviously I want to have those experiences because I'm obsessed with language learning. I'm having a really enjoyable time discovering what it's like to learn Yiddish and learn a Germanic language and learn a different alphabet and learn a language that isn't as commonly learned as Spanish or French or German. Who learns Yiddish? Not many people. So it's a really fun experiment for me. And with that, I don't have to put as much pressure on being consistent, on, you know, rounding out different skills, making sure that I understand grammar points strongly. I don't have to think about that so much. I can just fiddle around on Duolingo, fiddle around on Mango languages, and just kind of, you know, have some fun. So I'm really interested to see how that translates into my strategy in the long term. All this to say that your approach to language learning, your approach to different languages and your language learning strategies, they change between languages. They change between experience you have in the language, experience you have in related languages, like other Romance languages, other Germanic languages, other Asian languages. Your approach changes based on what you want to accomplish with the language, what resources are available, what resources you want to use, the time that you have for any different language. These are all things to keep in mind, that language strategies are not a one-size-fits-all approach, not even, you know, between different language learners, but between different languages. Your approach to different languages should change based on those languages. That is all I have for this video. In the comment section below, let me know, you know, will you ever learn different languages at the same time? Is that something that kind of scares you? Because it has definitely scared me in the past. I think the issue is that I go hard with Spanish, and I was afraid of going so hard with other languages. I had to teach myself that isn't necessary. It is not necessary to be super goal-oriented and super intensive and super focused on a language if you don't want to. If that's not in the cards for you, that's totally cool. But I have definitely learned how to shift my perspective on each language I want to learn and just be okay with not being perfect in my goals and not wanting to take the ultimate C2 exam in every single language. Definitely a perspective shift. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Make sure you subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I post a new video every Wednesday and Sunday. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.